There was this one thing you said in an interview, and we were talking about this earlier, this idea of written versus being able to explain.
Correct.
And there was this great point you made that I think people wouldn't recognize with the amount of success you've had, the hits you've had. I think people want to know about you and learn about you. But you said, when you come from where I come from and everybody doesn't get those breaks, that luck, you start to question, why am I successful in life? Why did I go this way and everybody went that way? And I just thought that was, again, extremely humble and also representative of where you grew up, how you came up. Like, which way did everyone go and where did that luck begin for you?
I think coming up in Newark, New Jersey, coming up in that environment and, having, when you're younger, you're living life, you're taking it a day at a time. You're going to basketball practice, you're going to school, you're going to church, you're for me, it was, taking a lot of trips to New York City, going on auditions at a really, really young age and just figuring out what that is. Having parents pretty aware, and very present in my life, growing up, that was rare amongst my family and amongst my friend group, having both parents that was there and very present and aware of my environment as well. Being told to look out for these things and make good choices, to be disciplined, to be focused on things, get your school, all the positives in growing up in an environment like that. And, hats off to my parents and to sacrifice so much to make sure their kids, were safe and grew up grew up in an environment. It ain't easy making ends meet, grew up very poor, but didn't feel like it. You know what I'm saying? It was very, I think they did a good job at hiding those things. I think as we get older, we look back, it was like, oh man, we went through that. Oh, that's why we slept in the kitchen that one time with the oven open. Or that's when we stayed at grandma's house for like, a couple of weeks when, so you get that reflection of how we kind of grew up. And I think for me, always having a bigger purpose, I think, or just, just that optimism, that I was a big dreamer as a kid. And I think, you start to, not just to focus on just the work of it all, but since I was working such a young age, that's the thing that I can kind of point to of, booking auditions and getting this job and traveling to this place and experiencing these things and coming back home with these experiences and not having a lot of people who could relate or could, I could soundboard off of. And I think in feeling like that, you don't want to alienate those people, and I think, and this is all, I guess, in hindsight, you don't share these stories as much, maybe you should, because you don't want somebody to feel like inadequate or, not being able to have that experience that you might have had. And I think, that snowballs as you get older and from stepping stone to stepping stone as I continue to be successful at a young age. You start to question, why am I being so successful? And the people that look just like me that are right next to me in these everyday things aren't necessarily doing that or not choosing to, just didn't have those options that were laid out to them. And I think you start to doubt yourself for whatever reason or feel guilty for the things that you may or may not have. Even though, our parents were people of service, block parties or, cooking church dinners or, whenever, my house was the house that everybody came to at some point, whether we were going to get pizza that night or dad was going to take everybody camping or going to these things. Like that was kind of my house within my neighborhood and community. And so I think for me, being a person of service kind of, cause, it kind of comes from how I was raised and those are the examples that I knew growing up. I always felt lucky too. As you become more successful and you see less people look like you that are being successful in this realm, and you end up being the one guy that looks like me that's successful, or the couple guys or the usual suspects that you see in the audition room, or things of that nature. You start to sometimes question why are you? Now I feel as though it was my path. It was my purpose and spirituality, and growing up in a household that was very focused on, church and spiritual and meditation and just being aware of the world that we live in. I felt I was destined for something, not knowing what that was, but just something.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, when I'm hearing that, it sounds like, I love what you said. You were like, they hid we were poor and we didn't even see that. But this idea of like, you sound so, when I see you talk about your family, and for those of you who are watching, you can see it on Mike's face, but there's so much joy and there's bliss and there's like a happiness when you're looking back on that time. Like I can see it's a positive experience because of how you feel you've been loved and cared for and supported, even though the resources may not have been there or the access or opportunities. And I was wondering when I was listening to you, like, is there a memory or an experience from your childhood that you think defines who you are today? Like, was there a memory or a story that you have in your mind of an experience you went through that you think brings out maybe that service element or brings out that purposeful element?
And I think this bliss and this appreciation for how I grew up comes in hindsight. You know, like, you know, the first time you have a moment where you're like, pick up the phone, you know, one morning, you just call your mom and be like, thank you. I get it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for being that kid at some point. And I'm so sorry for not understanding. I totally get what you guys are going through. Sheesh. I love you guys, you know, like you have those moments when you get older, you know, that you just can't really have that perspective when you were a kid. And I think, you know, I was very mischievous, you know, as well. And I think there were moments when my dad disciplined me, you know, for whatever whatever I did at that time. And then my mom would have a conversation with me around the why. And then being also forced or pushed and nudged into a space where you had to acknowledge your siblings also, you know, in that situation and the importance of family and what that means, you know. My parents have different upbringings, you know what I'm saying, from, you know, and different family structures growing up. But one thing they've always provided us with is just a sense of like family over everything, you know, and how important that is. And that just kind of kept the groundedness to me throughout. So I think just the experiences of just family.
I like your point about hindsight. I've definitely made that call to my mom, for
Right?
sure. Like, yeah, I've made that call to my mom. And we were around the same age. So for me, it's like, I made that call. And I think I made it probably like 25, maybe 26.
Okay,
it was probably around then when I finally made that call. And not that I didn't love my mom before that. Of course I did. But it was like that honest understanding of just how hard it was to do what she did. Because she was raising 2 kids. She was dropping us to school, picking us up. She was the breadwinner of the family. She made us breakfast, lunch, and dinner fresh every day. Like, and you don't recognize that as a kid. You don't realize the sacrifice, the hustle, and always making you feel loved on top of doing all of that. It's hard work.